yeah, it looks like April could once again be a pretty crazy season for Marvel Snap cards. We just got the season video revealing the final versions of this month's cards, which means it's time to discuss all of these in the context of the current world of Marvel Snap. Discuss some of the changes to these cards since we last saw them in our data mine video, which there's actually a lot of little tweaks, some clarification, some stat changes as well. And then, of course, rate each of these from 1 to 4 stars, noting which we think are going to have the biggest impact on the game. So let's go ahead and kick things off here with the new Season Pass card, Captain Carter. And yeah, she honestly looks kind of crazy to me now. In a synergistic deck, this card seems like it could do some really big numbers. Since we first saw this in the data mines, we saw it as a 4-2. It is now a 4-3, which doesn't sound like much, but that's actually a big buff when you consider her effect. Ongoing, add this card's power to your back row cards here. Can't add to itself. So back row, what that means is, you know, there's those 4 slots in a location. The kind of top half would be the front row, and the back row would be kind of the bottom 2. So the 3rd and 4th card played in a given location. So that means she's 3, and she gives 3 and 3 to the back row. Assuming you fill those spots up, that makes her a 4-9 in effective total output. Again, she doesn't get the stats. She's giving them to the back row, but her total output is 9, which is really good for a 4-drop. Like at a baseline, that's already strong. 4-9 is a really good number. It's a little conditional, but you know, the decks running her in with will have the ways to fill up easily. Maybe it's even just like Squirrels or Sam's Shield or something to fill in those spots. Although, keynote, she does not get buffed by Sam's Shield. That has been confirmed. She is not Captain America, and it is specifically called Captain America's Shield. If you disagree with that, whatever, argue with Second Dinner. It's not my rule. I'm just explaining it to you. To me, it makes sense, but whatever. Feel free to debate the merits or the lore or whatever in the comments below. The takeaway is she doesn't get buffed by Sam's Shield, but could still be a really good card to fill in the back row really affordably, right? So you fill that back row, she's a 4-9. Now, on top of that, of course, you have additional scaling potential because anytime she gains power, that power is then also going to be added into the back row. So for instance, Spectrum in an ongoing deck, which would be a really awesome, obvious follow-up here, pushes her up to 5 power. She's now going to give 5 and 5 power to the back row. So she's a 3 that gives 5 and 5. That's a 4-13. You have stuff like Captain America maybe buffing her as well. That's also kind of insane, right? You could have this like super location of Sam, Captain America, Captain Carter next to him because she wants to be in the front row. Like turn 5, maybe you play Captain America behind her in the back row, and then you move the shield in at whatever given point, right? And you've just got this like super shield location of all the captains. She's not getting buffed by the shield, but it's still a good fit because the shield is buffing Cap and Sam Cap. Cap is buffing Captain Carter, which is buffing the Cap in the Cap shield. And, you know, that's kind of the, whether you drop a Spectrum or whatever, you know, follow up, and you've just got this like crazy home run where she is effectively kind of holding down a location by herself. Now, not literally by herself because she needs the cards there, but you kind of have like token throwaways behind her. And she's the power output engine of that given location. And then, you know, maybe you just have like Spectrum Iron Man or something in another location to hold that one down, and things are pretty cool. Now, you know, I will say she is a 4-drop and you need the cards to fall in behind her. So there's a little bit of a sequencing challenge where things kind of have to roll in perhaps on turn 5, particularly if you wanted to play Spectrum on 6. You don't have to. You can play things on 6 as well. But you basically only have that 2-turn window to get things in behind her, which could sometimes create some problems. But I will say, you know, sometimes even if one card falls behind her, she's still a 4-6. It's not a bad backup plan, right? It's not a bad kind of fail state. She is maybe something that's bad to play like on turn 6 because it might be hard to get enough stuff behind her. Then you could technically play her in 2 1-drops, like, you know, an Ant-Man and a Squirrel or something, and get the job done, but might be a little bit tougher. But, you know, ultimately, I think the numbers here are significant enough. And, you know, I think ongoing decks in particular are going to be a great fit, but she's not necessarily limited to that. You know, decks that have any kind of buffing or have any kind of zoo game plan could both utilize her potentially very well. So, you know, even just like Galacta buffing her becomes insane sort of thing. So I would keep an eye on her in a variety of homes. The most obvious fit for me is ongoing, particularly in combination with our next card. We're going to talk about Goliath. But and there's also Dum Dum coming in. We're going to talk about later in the video, later in the month. All of that supports Captain Carter potentially really well, and I think we could see a new era of ongoing decks finding tons of success. But she also has some home outside of that as well. maybe. I think any decks running buffs could find something really cool to do with this card. So here is Goliath. This is a 2/1 still, ongoing, +1 power for each other ongoing card you have in play. And this is just another immediate boost to ongoing decks, both coming out the same week. This is a Spotlight Cash card alongside Captain Carter. So, you know, 2 giant buffs basically to an ongoing archetype that has already found a lot of success with Doom 2099. Like, that deck has already been very, very good. In fact, it's gotten nerfed multiple times because of Doom 2099. We might see a different look that maybe moves away from the Doom 2099, a little bit more like Zooey, or, you know, wanting small cards. But this is a great small card to drop in behind Captain Carter. It doesn't like do anything extra, I'm not saying that, but just, you know, cheap and flexible. Can happily play this like on turn 5 with a 3-drop, and that's really good. So whether you're playing this on 2 and just trusting you get a really big guy out of this, or like I said, it's just coming in later to fill in behind a Captain Carter, just a great fit for ongoing decks. I think this is very often going to be like 6, 7, or even bigger. Honestly, it's pretty good with Doom 2099, summoning all those extra ongoings every turn after the Doom 2099 goes off. So honestly, just a really good high output card for a deck that's fully committed to ongoing. Now, of course, this one is going to require a full ongoing commitment. It doesn't have as much flexibility perhaps as Captain Carter, but it's just, you know, super efficient. This much power on a 2-drop is great. Flexibility too from a curve standpoint. It's really just a dream for ongoing decks altogether. So I think ongoing is going to be a great deck. It's going to be a great card, slightly less flexible from a deck fit standpoint, but still very, very strong. Moving on here to Kahhori, Reshaper of Worlds. I think this one got a little bit of a wording change for clarity's sake since we last saw it. I think functionality is exactly the same. It is still 4/6. On reveal, each card in your hand gives one of your cards in play +1 power. So I think before there was some confusion if this was more like Gwynpool buffing the hand. I tried to explain that it was the board last time, but I remember there's some confusion in the comments. But indeed, as expected, this is buffing the board, but it's actually a really significantly big buff potentially, right? When you play this, you could easily have 6 cards left in hand if you've managed to fill your hand ahead of time, which makes this a 4/6 that buffs 4/6 on board, which is a 412 in total output. And which, I mean, we know that's super efficient, and there are, you know, other upsides as well, things that care about stats. We already saw Captain Carter. I don't really know if Captain Carter makes sense here from a curve or synergy standpoint, but any other card that cares about onboard buffs would be a really good fit for Kahhori. You know, imagine you play an Iron Man on 5 and then you save this for turn 6 and you buff an Iron Man a few times, like boom, okay, that's extra scaling, of course, on the Kahhori on board. Stuff like, you know, turn 3 Dakin into turn 4 Kahhori. Like, Dakin's keeping the hand full, Kahhori is scaling it up even more. Is that good? Nah, probably not. You know, Dakin has other cool things to do with Bullseye, but there are all kinds of cards that benefit extra, and I don't even think you need that, you know? I think you're probably really just playing this in a hand-sized deck. You got Collector, you got Snow Guard, you got Kahhori, and you're just, you know, benefiting, a Devil Dinosaur, whatever. You're just benefiting from the big hand more than you're really caring about the extra stat benefit on board. Maybe there's some way to fuse those two worlds together, but I doubt it. I think it's just a big hand card. Now, that said, this card is like very good for that reason. Like, it's very powerful within that context. The numbers are very good. I don't know if it's enough to like push a hand deck into viability. I don't think this like turns that knob up enough to make that like a competitive deck. So the question then becomes like, is Kahhori good enough as a like Gwynpool alternate, you know, a Galacta alternate, where it's like, okay, this is just a really good 4-drop that if a deck's playing kind of slow enough or has any resource generation in it, you know, maybe this is just a 410 or 411 and total output. Again, it's not actually a 411. I mean, effective output. Then it's worth it anyway. You know, sometimes that could be better than a Gwynpool, could be better than a Galacta in some cases. So that's a possibility where some decks might flex this in. I don't know that it outcompetes those two cards specifically. So it might be more of that niche hand size thing, and then it might not push that to that competitive level. So that might mean Kahhori seems to fall a little short at first, but I do think this is a card to definitely keep in your back pocket, and like one number change on this up to a 4/7. This thing's crazy good, run everywhere. But for now, maybe just a little bit more specific in its use cases, but still a card with notable potential. All right, so moving on to Infinity Ultron. Very cool looking card here. There were some small text changes to this that are not represented on this slide because I I didn't save the original version and it was too much work to change it, but they are like text only. The functionality is exactly the same. It's just like some wording changes in clarity. But Ultron is still here at 5/6 with on reveal, add 2 Ultron Infinity Stones to your hand. Now, I don't have pictures of these, but we have the stats and the text. There's a 3/2 ongoing. Your on reveal abilities here happen twice. That is just Wong, basically a cheaper Wong. 3/2 on reveal, double Infinity Ultron's power. So that is, you know, a 3/2 that gives him +6, maybe more with some buffs. 3/3 on reveal for each full location you have, give a friendly card there +2 power. So the way that works, this is one actually that had a wording change that added some clarity to this. We weren't sure about last time, but basically this can also be +6 total. So if you have 3 locations, each of them is going to get a +2 buff. If you have 2 locations, each of those is going to get a +2 buff. So, you know, if you have a full board, this could be kind of a 3/9, a 3/3 that buffs +6. If you have less than a full board, not quite as exciting. There's the 3/4 on reveal, move the lowest power enemy card here to Infinity Ultron's location. So a little bit of a shift that like pushes stuff over to Infinity Ultron, maybe helps you nab a location for free with some of that disruption. A 3/1 on reveal, add a drone here, set its power to Infinity Ultron. So again, things that benefit from Ultron being buffed. Otherwise, kind of a 3/7 in total output, a 3/1 that summons 6 power. And finally, a 3/1 on reveal, put a card from your hand here, which could be a lot of power in a big deck, of course. Might have some weird stuff in stuck in hand too, though, where that's not quite as good. So you're going to get 2 of these, basically play Ultron on 5, and then you hope to have this cool turn 6 with the Ultron Stones. Clearly, there are ways to do more than that. If you have like, you know, why can't I think of the name? Quinjet on board, you know, these are cheaper. Maybe weave in another card. Otherwise, if you're paying full cost for these on turn 6, you're only going to get 2 of these. I mean, there are still some pretty nice turns possible, even at a base level with these. But you're going to get 2 random ones. So you don't know like what combinations. There's nothing like super predictable or reliable here, but you're going to try to find combinations that are pretty interesting. You know, I will say like a lot of these average out to being like good 3-drops. You know, like good solid 3-drops. Like we saw like 9 power a few times, 7 power output kind of numbers. They're not crazy 3-drops. I want to be clear. Like they're not crazy. I think you do need a little extra help to make these interesting. Like maybe actually just a Wong you've played earlier to kind of double some of these on reveals might be the sort of thing that helps a lot. You know, you'll maybe make some sneaky plays. There's some unpredictability baked into it, but I think there will be some underwhelming moments with these stones. Some of them, like, you know, moving the card, like maybe that doesn't have much impact sometimes. If you're running a buff deck and you run like a Gwyn pool and you buff up your Ultron a bunch, like then some of these get more interesting, like doubling the power. He could definitely hold down a spot more reliably on his own, that sort of thing. So I don't know. I'm like a little mixed on this card. I almost feel like this could maybe be a 5/7 just to push these numbers a little bit, because it is kind of railroading you into this really predictable output when you play this, like a pretty mediocre turn 5. Like that's part of it, is like your turn 5 sucks a lot of the time. You're just playing a 5/6. I don't know if the upside on these stones is enough to make that bad 5-drop worth it. I think I could push a lot of these numbers maybe one more spot and I'd feel a lot safer about this card. So very fun looking, very cool. I love these sort of token generating cards like this. I don't think this is on that like Agamotto level though, where it feels nuts. I mean, maybe there's that mix of stuff like Quinjet and buffs and Wongs that comes together into making these like crazy turn 6s, but then you're talking about, you know, building an entire deck around it. That feels kind of risky too. So I'm very excited about this card thematically. Just from a power level standpoint, I do currently have some concerns, but it's definitely one of those where I think they would invest in this, and like they've probably tested this a lot, and it's probably a little better than I'm expecting, or we just would have seen some of these numbers pushed up since we saw them in the data mine, but they've stayed exactly the same. So maybe that's a sign for success actually here, that something might go right with this, because otherwise, you know, some of these 3-1s, like why aren't these 3-2s now? Why isn't this a 3-3 sort of thing? Like I think that's probably a good sign. So I'm kind of using my judgment against second dinners here and landing somewhere in the middle, but I still don't see this card being absolutely crazy. All right, so moving on here, we have Strange Supreme. Still a 2/2 since we last saw him. A little bit of a wording change for clarity here. He gains +2 power from merging, and end of turn, merge one of your created cards into this. So Basically, anytime you have a created card on board, Strange is going to slurp one up at the end of the turn. He's going to gain that card's stats from a natural merge, and he's going to gain an additional +2. So a couple possibilities here. You know, you could have a deck that's intentionally creating cards, say like Reshaper or whatever. You're just playing out your Reshaper cards, and Strange is eating them up every turn, getting much bigger. I think perhaps more interesting is like token generating stuff, like you know, squirrels. Summon some squirrels. He's going to eat a couple squirrels and get bigger. Like debris. I'm going to give my opponent rocks. They're going to get locked up with rocks, but Strange is going to eat my rocks. And, you know, I don't lose the space, and I still gain some additional stats off Strange. Like, there's a couple angles there that sound pretty interesting. All in all, that does mean, you know, if you're playing well to this, he gets pretty big. Like, you play this on turn 2. If you already had something down on turn 1, you know, he could effectively, well, I guess on turn 2, if you had 2 squirrels, actually, like if you played Squirrel Girl on 1, he could eat every single turn starting on turn 2. So you'd have turn 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. That's 5 times eaten. That's +10. That would effectively make him a 212. Just from his base output. Any other stats he accumulates, of course, could make him even bigger. Eat a couple squirrels. You're already at 14 power. It's not really additive, but is relevant if you wanted to like make a giant Strange and just eat a million things and then like Artem Zola it at the end of the game. Could be kind of a cool thing, you know, make a 25 power Strange and then Artem Zola it. It's pretty sweet. Like, I don't know if that's actually a deck, but it's a cool idea. I don't think you need that necessarily to make Strange good though. Like, there's a lot of worlds where he's just a 2/8, a 2/10 from your natural play, and that makes him a really nice free little addition for any decks that are just naturally playing towards this. So whether that's tokens, whether that's Arishem, just, I don't know, any deck, like a hand deck with Kahhori or whatever, that's creating a bunch of cards in hand or resources or whatever, there are definitely some ways to get a lot of free extra stats out of Strange. And you don't need to go crazy. At 2/6 in some decks might be enough. If he eats twice, that's perhaps good enough. There's also the angle of like actual additional merge cards. I guess you could kind of like double dip a little bit, like, you know, run an Agony or run a like Hulkbuster, I guess, Penny Parker or whatever, and like try to get some extra hits out of the merging, right? I don't know if that's the angle to go, but it's another possibility at least. So I'm like a little more positive on this card than when I first saw it. I think it's actually pretty cool. Very specific, you know, niche deck fits perhaps, but does have some surprising potential in those worlds. Moving on here to Hydra Stomper. I think this one got both a text change and a buff since we last saw it. It is now a 3/2. It's nice. Ongoing, +1 power for each time one of your cards moved this game, which last time we talked about this in the data mine, this was actually the specific question I brought up. Is it because before it said for each of your cards that has moved this game. Now it specifies each time your cards have moved, which is a really big difference, because if you're moving like a Human Torch 4 times to scale up a giant Human Torch, this now gets +4. Whereas before, if it was just the one Human Torch and it was based on cards, it was left a little bit open, would only get +1. So really nice here. So things like Hercules, for instance, become quite intriguing now with Hydra Stomper, where you're just bouncing cards around like crazy. You know, 1 move turning into 2 adds +2 power to the Hydra Stomper. You can actually see this starting to scale up pretty quickly with all of that various moving. And then, you know, you play this down on turn 5 or something after you've done all that moving throughout the early game. Then you slam like a Heimdall on turn 6. You maybe have another 5 or 6 cards moving. I think getting this thing up to like 10, 12 power is actually not that crazy in move decks. Some games. I think there will be other games, though, where suddenly it feels like, man, like it just didn't work out and I didn't move enough and this is only like a 3/5. And maybe then it feels like it's not worth it because you kind of gave up time and opportunity to proc move synergies. You know, there are little downsides there that make this like, I don't know, man. I'm still worried about like curve fit and just like timing windows and like commitment to it. Sometimes move decks do just need to fully commit to moving things or pay off move cards. This is a payoff, but in a different direction. You know, you kind of have 2 sides of that movement thing usually. So I don't know, man. I think this is one I almost feel like I have to play a lot to get a good feel for. But I think a deck could come together around Heimdall in particular, where maybe Heimdall's enough to just make this pretty good. You know, maybe a Heimdall makes this a 3/8 on its own, and that's kind of enough, and you feel good about that. I will note some things like this only works on your cards, not your opponents. So, you know, Spider-Man's not a double dip, like 2 for 1. Spider-Man might be good to run, but it won't like, you know, double tick this up from your opponent's cards, nor is this like a tech card against move or for mirror matches or anything. It is specifically your cards. I guess if you're a move deck that's playing into a push deck, like a Scream push deck, then you'd get to double dip. That'd be pretty insane, but that seems unlikely and not a reason to really run this necessarily. So I think this is an interesting different angle for move decks. I think, you know, it could move them in a slightly different direction that's just more chaotic and bouncy and crazy and Hercules driven and stuff. But I don't really think it's going to like push them to the next level or redefine, you know, some cool new meta archetype around it necessarily. So perhaps more of an intriguing card than a super strong one. All right, so our final card here is Dum Dum Dugan. He is a 2/3 now. I think he was a 2/2 when we first saw him. Ongoing, your front row cards here have +1 power and it can't add to itself. So perfect card for Captain Carter. He's going to come out in high voltage a few weeks later, but just the dream follow-up to Captain Carter, giving her a nice little +1 buff that she then gives back. You know, they're friends, they're buds, I guess, and that's pretty cool. Also, you know, just kind of a 2/5 ongoing card. I think don't sleep on that for an ongoing deck. That's actually pretty good. I will say, like, Spectrum ongoing decks in general have kind of had a gap at the 2-cost slot. You would often just play like an armor or something because you just didn't have a good thing that like fed into your power output game plan. You just needed like a 2-drop body. You know, Sam has come in to fix that a little bit. Like Sam Wilson was perfect because you also get the shield, but you don't want to just run 1 2-drop. So I think Dum Dum and Goliath now give you this really nice suite of 2-drops that are perfect to play on 2 and still good to play on turn 5 with a 3-drop as well. So it's kind of hitting this 2-for-1. Particular, you know, this one you want to play on turn 5, not on turn 2. So, you know, it's nice to have like Sam and Goliath for turn 2, and then maybe this guy on turn 5 with a 3-drop. Because on turn 2, you're almost never going to be able to kind of double dip on this. It might still be worth it to play for tempo because there will be one other front row card, but you'll just kind of sacrificing one of your buffs. There will definitely be moments that's fine and worth it, and you're just filling your curve. But ideally, you'd rather save this for 5 and play one of your other 2-drops. So ultimately, still I think a really good card, kind of sleeper, quiet, good card for ongoing decks. Probably not worth it outside of that because kind of, you know, 5 power is the ceiling on this usually. And that's not going to be worth it for most decks, particularly because you're pushing it towards the late game and it's not something you readily play on 2 as easily. It'd be a 2/4 effectively on turn 2. So probably a very specific card again, but I think a really good fit for ongoing. I think this will make the cut in what I think will be very good ongoing decks. All right, so all that said, let's now go ahead and rate these cards from 1 to 4 stars. Captain Carter is a 4-star card. Goliath is a 4-star card. Strange Supreme is a 3-star card. Infinity Ultron is a 3-star card. Kahhori is a 3-star card. Dum Dum Dugan is a 3-star card. Hydra Stomper is a 2-star card. Yeah, there you go. It's pretty interesting stuff. Like really pushing ongoing, but I think it's going to be really good. I mean, wait and see before you go out and buy this, but I suspect ongoing decks are going to be top of the meta type decks. I think Kahhori has a lot of potential, maybe not immediately, but one of those cards to keep an eye on. Ultron, I don't know, man, it's super fun. Power level, I'm teetering between 2 and 3 stars, but I'm giving it the nod to 3 because I trust Second Dinner would have buffed it otherwise because they probably want this to feel like a really, you know, standout card people want to get, that sort of thing. And yeah, Strange looks solid. Dum Dum looks solid. Hydra Stomper is my most doubted card here, but I don't think he's like crazy bad or anything. But still, Captain Carter might be the star here of the month, and ongoing could actually get pretty oppressive, I think. I think it's going to be a really strong deck. So all in all, share your thoughts on these cards down below. Thanks much, as always, for watching. Of course, stay tuned for some videos on these cards. I will note I'm going to be out of town a little bit the first week of the month, so you will probably get a Captain Carter video, but you'll get it late, and it will be on a laptop for me. So it's going to sound a little different because I think I'll be recording on the fly, either from a hotel or at some family's house. But it'll be a little hectic this week, but I should have still plenty of videos coming out. I've recorded a handful of stuff early to keep things going, but just not a lot of coverage of the new cards. Maybe some more evergreen fun videos instead of that, but we'll still get Captain Carter and Goliath, at least Goliath on day 1. So anyway, thanks much for watching. Stay tuned for all that and more. And I guess I will see you around.